The messed up reason that age 30 is the new 20. 30 is the new 20, but it's not because people are living longer. And if you just rolled your eyes and said, kids these days, then you've hit to the heart of the problem. 20-year-olds are not kids, but society treats them like kids. Historically, kids have started to be considered adults around the age of 13 or sometime around puberty. Of course, few people truly thought of 13-year-olds as full-fledged adults, but the point was to start treating them like adults. Along with freedom came responsibility for your actions. Because teens were expected to act like adults, they quickly learned what was expected of them to be a respected member of society. And they largely rose to the occasion, becoming full-fledged adult members of society within a few years. Usually around the age of 18 or 20, young adults would start being considered equal members of adult society. By then, the training phase was over. But these days, you're treated like a child at least up to the age of 21 in the United States. Society doesn't even begin to consider you an adult until almost a decade after puberty starts. But it still takes years to become an adult. In the past, teenagers practiced being an adult. Now that practice takes place in your 20s. So instead of going through that awkward adult training phase from 13 to 20, you go through the same phase from about 21 through 28. You get your first real job in your 20s, but the company still has to train you, not just the skills required for the job, but basic things like appropriate workplace behavior, using time wisely, staying on task, showing up on time, or showing up at all. Teens used to get 7 years of apprenticeship and be experienced, skilled workers by the time they were 20. They were ready to support a family. They had practiced responsible behavior. They knew how to take care of themselves and how to navigate the adult world. According to Robert Epstein, PhD, in his book Teen 2.0, Saving Our Children and Families from the Turmoil of Adolescence, through most of human history, young people were integrated into adult society early on. But beginning in the late 1800s, new laws and cultural practices began to isolate teens from adults, imposing on them an increasingly large set of restrictions, and artificially extending childhood well past puberty. New research suggests that teens today are subjected to more than 10 times as many restrictions as are most adults, and adulthood is delayed until well into the 20s or 30s. People grow up on a continuum. The natural way to grow up is to match your responsibilities with physical changes. For example, you get bigger and you can do harder physical work. Your brain develops and you can solve more difficult problems. As you gradually and naturally take on more responsibility for your own affairs, you get the freedom to match. You get rights and privileges not at an arbitrary age, but instead when you prove competence to handle those responsibilities. That continuum has been smashed. Since the 1800s, restrictions on teens have skyrocketed. And during the same time period, teenage rebelliousness was born. It started with labor restrictions, supposedly for the good of the children. But labor unions also favored these laws because they eliminated lower paid competition from young people. Today, older generations have similar incentives to ward off challenges from the youth for power and jobs. Then, mandatory schooling laws came. Young people were grouped by age and isolated from most adults. Instead of doing productive work, earning money, gaining skills, and being socialized, teens were institutionalized. This was not just a way to control the youth physically and mentally. It also allowed the industrialists to use tax dollars to condition these future laborers for factory jobs and other menial work. Now, schools concerned about attendance or concerned about the budgets, which are based on attendance, are dragging teens away from their paying jobs and forcing them back into a failing, dangerous school system. I'm citing an actual case where school resource officers physically removed a young woman from her paying job and dragged her back to school. Grouping students by age also means less exposure to people of varying ages. That makes it harder for kids to grow up, isolated from adults who could teach them how to be an adult. Instead, the peer group influences behavior. Marketers latched onto this to create a specific adolescent market, or teen culture. Now, that teen culture is spreading like imperialism, delaying adulthood worldwide. For most of human history, until the time of the Industrial Revolution, the vast majority of children worked alongside adults as soon as they were able, and they transitioned to partial or full adulthood by their early, mid, or late teens. In most industrialized countries today, teens are almost completely isolated from adults. They're immersed in teen culture, required or urged to attend school until their late teens or well into their 20s, largely prohibited from or discouraged from working. No longer can you naturally transition to adulthood in your teens. Society will not allow it. The government has outlawed being an adult as a teen. So now you have to attempt to pick back up on becoming adult after almost a decade of artificial extended childhood in your teens and early 20s. But this isn't the 20-somethings' fault. They didn't choose to be treated like children well past puberty. They aren't the ones who invented the scourge of adolescence. And in addition to becoming an adult, the 20-something must cope with the lingering psychological effects of tyranny in the teenage years. Often, the suppression that they suffered causes real psychological problems like depression or even suicide. Now, society has been conditioned to believe that teens are overall incompetent, irresponsible, and helpless. But to the contrary, the angsty teen didn't even exist until society restricted them. It is not natural, it is not hormones, it is a terrible system. Frankly, it is a crime perpetrated against teens and young adults. They have been robbed of their freedom, and this is leaving scars on society. It creates more dependence and fewer productive people. It conditions adults to defer to authority instead of valuing freedom and personal responsibility. The good news is responsible teens and good parents can work together to immediately begin to retake the freedom and responsibility that young adults deserve. As for older people who have already been through the government's meat grinder, it's never too late to free yourself. And although you have been an actual victim, the victim mentality never helps. Instead, you'll find empowerment by taking control of your life, gaining skills, and building the career of your dreams. Freedom and responsibility always go hand in hand. So if you want freedom, which you should, you can start by taking ownership of your situation and taking ownership of yourself. Don't forget to leave a like and comment, subscribe if you want more content like this. I'm Joe Jarvis. Thanks for watching, and come back and see me again soon.